When you have something that you can thoroughly enjoy, not only with yourself, like with others, it brings a different like quality to your life. Like your life is so much more enriched. And I know for you, through the dancing, you actually kind of fell in love, not only with the dancing, but with someone, right?
That is true.
So tell us a little
And
bit about how that happened.
well, as I said, I was the regular at the Eagles Hall in Alameda, and I had a number of dance partners there. And one time, a very tall, sort of distinguished guy came over and asked me to dance. And I'd kind of seen him before because he always wore a fedora. This is kind of a convention of Zydeco dancers. Either it's a cowboy hat or some kind of fedora or something. Even we women sometimes wear little pork pie hats. You know, when we're dancing outside, as I said in Louisiana, I always wear a hat. So indoors, the guys wear hats. And this guy had on this kind of spiffy fedora and came over, asked me to dance. And boy, within about, oh, I don't know, 2 minutes, I'm going like, wow, this guy is a really good dancer. And I described this in the opening chapter of my book, Disconnected, Portrait of a Neurodiverse Marriage, because clearly things went in a somewhat different direction. But, he was just such a great dancer. And one of the things I loved about him is that he had very strong frame. In the dance world, frame is the kind of structure that the leader provides for the follower. And he had a very strong frame that made me feel incredibly secure. And that later carried over into my willingness to get into a relationship with him. I trusted him because of how he was on the dance floor.
I think that is such a fantastic story. It reminds me of like when people say, I want that Disney movie type of love. Right? Where you find someone through, let's say you looked across the room, they look back at you,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm not talking about like way back in the day, like maybe my parents' age, where you dropped a handkerchief in the middle of the farmer's market and that gave all the men the signal that you're ready. But this is like a fantastic story because this is something that you share. Like, do you think that you would have found someone at a venue like that?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people in the Zydeco realm dated people that they danced with. This was not unusual. I dated others of my dance partners. It's just that this particular relationship really took.
And then the rest was somewhat history. But this was, as you mentioned earlier in our chat, finding love. Was that later love?
It was quite a bit later, love. I was 64 when I met him. By that time, I'd been Zydeco dancing for more than 20 years. And he had taken it up a bit later in time than I had. And I had seen him before, so it wasn't like that was when he first started dancing when we met. He had been dancing. Um, but he had just never asked me to dance, and somehow our paths, we just hadn't connected. And this one particular time, this is back in 2012, he asked me to dance. And then we danced together over the course of the next month, and then we started dating. And we dated for 8 months. It got pretty serious there. And then he dropped me, like literally dropped me with no explanation. He asked for his keys back. It's kind of classic, right? It's the Simon and Garfunkel song, Drop Off the Key Lee. Well, it happened. It happened to me. And I also describe this in the book. I think it's one of the best scenes in the book, I think. I might be a little bit biased. There's some great scenes in the book, but that scene in particular, as a breakup scene, is just classic because it lays the foundation for what's going to happen later on in the story. And I just, looking back on that, I can think all sorts of things that, oh, that should have been a huge red flag. Oh, I should have like never agreed to go out with him again, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what happened. And, there are a lot of twists and turns in any relationship, but in our relationship, there certainly were a number. And after about 6 months, after he broke up with me and proceeded to ignore me at dances, like literally, he'd walk by me and it would be as if I wasn't there, I didn't exist. And I would be thinking to myself, dude, wow, really? Are you? Is that serious? What is with you? Finally, after about 6 months, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but he used to sit at the dances in this Eagles Hall. It's a big hall with an amazing wooden dance floor and a stage where the band plays. It's always live music. We always dance to live music. So there's tables along the side of the wall, and because it's an Eagles Hall, there's also a bar. These Eagles people, they drink. Okay, so people would get drinks from the bar, and there would be tables along the side of the dance floor, and they'd be sitting at tables having a beer, whatever. Well, my person would be sitting there reading a book. And that was such an unusual thing to be doing that after about 6 months, I went up to him one night and I said, "Hey, hi, how you doing? What are you reading?" And of course, he always loved to talk about what he was reading. So we started chatting. And before you know it, we started dancing together again. And so for the next 4 years, we were dance partners. And sometimes he would help me out with his technology because the guy's a computer genius. Okay. So sometimes if I was in a jam with my laptop or my iPhone or whatever, I'd let him know, I'd text him or something, and he'd stop by and he would fix my technology for me. And then I'd give him, like a gift certificate to City Arts and Lectures or the Commonwealth Club or some, intellectual thing that he liked to do. And so we kind of traded like that. And over the course of those 4 years, we really got to be friends. And I was still super curious about why. Why did he break up with me? So one night I was dancing with them and I thought, you know, really, probably this breakup had something to do with me as well. I must have done or said something that triggered this. So I thought, you know, I just kind of looked up at him and I said, when you broke up with me, I was actually very happy. And he looked down at me and gave me this kind of intense stare and said, but I wasn't. And I said, I understand that now. And I want to sincerely apologize for whatever it was that I said or didn't say or did or didn't do that caused it to be that way for you. I'm so sorry. And he didn't say anything. He was a man of few words. We just kept dancing, but something shifted in that moment. And it was a couple months after that that we ended up getting back together again.
That reminds me of a story where there's someone that I was dating, and the way I met her was similar because we had a common passion. And we discussed it, we talked about it, and I found it was helpful in getting to know the person, not only
Mhm,
through the passion, but let's say on an emotional level, like what their needs are, what their
mhm.
desires are. And then once we finally decided to say, hey, how about if we take this to the next level and actually be together? She was like, oh, I thought you would never ask in a way, right? So part of me looked back and I'm like, I wonder if that was her plan all along. And when I kind of try to get it out of her, she would like mention certain things and then she'll realize that she's letting on that maybe she kind of was piecing together, like was putting things into place. And her response would be like, okay, I've said too much. And she'll stop talking and then she'll like totally change the topic. And because
Uh-huh.
she spends a lot of time in like in this city. I always make the joke like like there's sports teams in every city. So anytime she's saying something that I know is maybe a little bit uncomfortable for her or emotionally revealing, but so how about those Toronto Raptors, those Toronto Maple Leafs? Right, but that's like her get out of jail free card, right?
Oh, you're so kind.
I try, and I hear your story, and I'm wondering if that was like a little bit of the ploy between the two. Like you guys have the dancing, and it's like, okay, we enjoy each other, we're seeing each other. It started the relationship, and it kind of brought you guys back to it. Do you think it kind of played a part in reuniting you guys?
Oh, absolutely. Again, there's a scene in the book where I describe what I just told you about, but it goes on. And I'm going inside into my interior and describing what was happening for me. And I kind of go into this reverie. And I remember this couple from when I was a kid and how much in love they were. They were the only married people I knew, where the moment the guy came in the house after work, the woman would be there and like she would look like a movie star, the way she looked at this guy, and he would come over and they would kiss, and it would last longer than any other parent's kiss on that block, okay? It was like there was something really going on there. So, in this reverie that I'm describing after this apology takes place, I'm thinking about Ed and Nids, and I'm remembering what it was like, and I go off on this long riff about it. And as I was writing it, I thought, whoa, this is a real digression. And then I thought, no, this is perfect. This is perfect because what did we dream of as children, especially if we were girls? Okay, it's really true. We were socialized for romance. You mentioned Disney movies, whatever, fairy tales, the whole culture. Back then, particularly because I'm talking about the 1950s, that's what it was all about. Your whole aim in life was to find a guy, get married, have a house with a white picket fence and a couple of kids or whatever. That was really never my aim. My parents were a little bit different. But, I was swimming in that water. I was in that cultural water. And that really went deep in me. And so I realized, no, it's fine to digress like this because people who are going to read this are really going to relate to this. It, especially anybody who grew up in the same era.
So
But
talk to us a little
anybody will.
bit. Yeah, right. And talk to us a little bit about the book because you reference a lot of scenes that will definitely entice a lot of people because who doesn't like a good love story, then a fallout, then a reconnection and a building of life. So when you wrote this book, what was your ultimate goal from it?
That's such a good question. And I have to say it changed because when I started this book, it was 2019. It was like a year after we got back together. We had decided to move in together, and we had moved together into a new community, not far from where we were living before, but we moved east of San Francisco a bit farther because it was more affordable. So we were part of this community. It was an over 55 community. I started writing a column for the newspaper here. And it occurred to me, oh, a lot of these folks are in my age group. They would want to know about this relationship, right? This later in life romance. And this is so cool. And we're doing fun things. We're traveling and we're dancing and we're doing all these things. And so I started I wrote a couple of short pieces. And then I thought, you know what? This would make a great book. I'm going to write a book. Now, this is not my first book. I have another book called Swimming with Maya, which is my first memoir. This is my second. In between, I wrote a novel, which has not yet been published. So I just thought I'm going to write about this. This is cool. This is fun. So my original idea was it was going to kind of be sort of a Nora Ephron kind of lighter, kind of tongue-in-cheek story of two older people who are completely opposite personalities who meet on the dance floor and fall in love, and they ultimately decide to get married because by that time we were engaged. So we were going down this pathway of, getting married. And that was my original idea. Then we got married, and on our honeymoon, I was working on a book proposal. We were in Italy, and we were with a group of writers at a place that one of my writer friends had rented, and she was offering consultations. And I remember going to talk to her and saying, hey, here's my idea for the book. And we were batting it around. And I was saying, and in the proposal, I'm going to say, these are my comparable titles, and I'm going to do this and that, blah, blah, blah. So then we got back, and like 2 months later, COVID happened. And then we weren't going anywhere. We weren't dancing, we weren't socializing. And suddenly, the sort of quirky, intellectual, interesting things about him were slowly changing into something different. And gradually, he started to be somebody that I couldn't quite recognize. Like he would have meltdowns, he would have shutdowns, and I would never really know ahead what would trigger them. Over time, I kind of figured it out a little bit better. But it was scary and it was perplexing. And I realized, I'm thinking Asperger's syndrome here, which is actually now known as autism spectrum disorder 1. And so I started trying to do some research because by this time I'm married to the guy, right? I mean, I really am motivated to try to save this marriage, and it's not going in a good direction. So I started doing a bunch of research. And as I'm doing this research, I'm changing the way my book is going and realizing, oh, wait a minute, this may turn out to be a little bit different. So I changed the title of the book. The original title was Better Late. Then I changed in the middle the title to Space and Grace, which is a term I heard from a therapist who is an autism certified coach. And she used that term when she was talking to us. She said, look, you guys, you need to give each other space and grace. And I immediately thought, oh, that's a really good book title. So I just, the book was changing and I decided to make it that title. Then after 3.5 years, when the marriage was like spiraling down the drain, I realized, oh no, space and grace, that's not working. So then the book became what it is now, Disconnected, Portrait of a Neurodiverse Marriage. So that's how it happened. So my original goal, I kept the same goal. It's still a love story. 2/3 of the book are about falling in love and what happened as we went down the path. The last third is about when it was falling apart.
And how were you able to navigate through a marriage that has neurodiversity in it?
Honestly, not very well. I tried. I really tried. I insisted that we start getting marital therapy within, like the first few months of the marriage because things were not going the way I was thinking they were going to be going. But at that time, I didn't understand that when you are a neurodiverse couple, you have very special needs. And regular therapy, I'll just call it regular, but couples counseling, like most people get, not only doesn't help, it can actually be harmful because the autistic partner will often be masking with the therapist, pretending that they are neurotypical and that they understand what the therapist is saying about feelings. And then the neurotypical person who's not masking, who's in a lot of distress by this time, looks like a hysteric. And it looks like that is the problem. And so it's very tricky. And one of the things I attempt to do in this book is give people resources so they don't have to go through what we went through, which is 3 rounds of marital therapy, all of them ineffective. And by the time I finally found autism certified people to work with, it was too late. The damage had already been done.
I wonder
So
how many people enter marriage, we'll speak about that, with a design of it in their mind, right? They've constructed what a marriage should look like, whether they've read it online, seen movies, their parents, whatever. They were conditioned, manipulated, or at least, let's say they were, they left an imprint from it. And then when they enter a marriage and it differs from what they have in their mind, there's anxiety, maybe. They panic because they don't know how to soothe themselves when their situation isn't what they ideally thought it was. And then to your point now, right? Like they have to make a decision. Do they start speaking to their partner saying that, hey, this is what I'm going through. Maybe we need some help if you and I can't resolve it. Or maybe some people just shut down and they don't know how to deal with it. How did you come to the conclusion that it was neurodiversity and you guys needed more than normal therapy?
I think there were behaviors that, as I was reading certain books about neurodiverse relationships, so clearly tracked with what was being described in those books that I didn't have any doubts about it. Now, we need to be very careful here because my now ex-spouse is officially undiagnosed. I found a psychologist during the pandemic who was still doing evaluations online with adults. That's another thing. If you're a kid, there's tons of resources for you. If you're an adult over the age of 50, not so much. It's starting to get better, but part of our issue was generational. He had never been diagnosed and gone through a whole lifetime. And so all the behaviors, all the coping mechanisms had been cemented, just as you were saying, right? So he refused to work with this man. He met with him and on Zoom or I don't know by phone, and he said, "Oh, I like him, but he's too expensive. I'm not going to do this." So when I say he's autistic, I'm basing that on people we worked with. We did get into a support group for neurodiverse couples where, we were with other couples who were dealing with the same issues, and it was so clear. I mean, he was like the other guys in the group. It was very clear. And he kind of acknowledged that, but I don't think even to this day he would go, if someone asked him, if he would say, "Oh yeah, I'm autistic." I'm not sure if he would. He might just
Maybe
say, "Oh, I just think outside the box," or, "Oh yeah, I just like things that are different from what most people like." Because it's a label, right? And so I think unfortunately, in these cases where it's an older person, usually a man, but sometimes a woman, I know of cases where it's a neurotypical man married to an autistic woman. The issues and the frustrations are the same, except that women are a bit better at masking and at understanding because of the empathy thing that we grow up with. So they can mask the autism a little bit better, okay? But it these older situations with older people who have gone through their lifetime undiagnosed, who ends up diagnosing them? Their spouse. Because out in the outside world, autism is not so obvious. If your person is high functioning, which I know a lot of autism, activists don't like that terminology, but I have to use some kind of word. So I'm going to say if your person has Asperger's or ASD1, and they're very good at masking, and my ex is high masking, what's known as high masking. In the outside world, you're not going to be able to know that that person is autistic because they're not going to behave with you the way they behave behind closed doors with their intimate other. And part of the heartbreak of this is that it's the very closeness that causes the breakdown because the autistic person is so threatened by the neurotypical partner's approach to closeness, because they do it very differently, that if there's not the adequate support, what I discovered is my person just shut down. Like he literally would not talk to me for days. I'd be putting a nice hot meal on the table and sitting down and wanting to have some conversation at dinner, talking to him. He would not respond. If something had upset him, or in extreme cases, like during the pandemic, I interrupted him one time when he was in his office. I wanted to tell him something. I went back to his home office and I, knocked and went in, and he slammed his fists on the desk. Papers went flying everywhere, and he screamed at me, "Leave me alone." And I was like so stunned. I just literally, I think my mouth was hanging open, and I just backed out of the office and went, "Whoa, okay, dude. All right. I get it." So those kind of behaviors would not come out in the outside world in a job situation or a social situation. They would only come out with an intimate partner. And so it's oftentimes the spouses who end up diagnosing the person. And
because
then
they're
if the
seeing.
person, yeah, they're experiencing it.
Hmm.
And, if they're wanting to save the relationship, it's like, "Oh, well, now what do I do?" Right? So if they can get to the right resource, some people are able, with support, with behavior modification, not therapy. I have to emphasize, not therapy. Autism is not a mental illness. There are certain other mental illnesses like depression and anxiety and pervasive demand avoidance and alexithymia, inability to have words for feelings. There are other conditions that go along with it, but autism itself is simply brain wiring. So therapy is useless for that. You need to have behavior modifications. You need to learn tips and tricks, and you both need to learn it. Okay? Because the neurotypical needs how to learn how to speak autistic. And boy, did I try. I tried everything. But I found that my partner was not interested in learning how to speak neurotypical. So we were just going past each other. The words we used didn't even mean the same things. It was beyond frustrating. It was heartbreaking. It was enraging. It was very, very, very difficult. And at the end, I just said, I am so exhausted. I am losing my own soul, my own self, and I cannot do this anymore. It's becoming way too damaging for me. So that was kind of the trajectory. And, 85%, some estimates are, I don't know if they're hard and fast figures, but estimates I've read say 85% of these relationships, of these marriages end in divorce. So it's it's a rough road. Now, those 15% who can find a way to do it, my hat is off to them. I think it's amazing. You got to have so much patience and so much willingness to stay with it and to find the language and to find the ways that are going to work for you. Oftentimes, I find the couples who are successful at staying together actually end up living separately, but they maintain their relationship. So, yeah, it's complicated.
It sounds like it, and I wonder for both parties involved if it's one of those situations where what we're asking from one another at that point in the conflict and the breakdown is that we're asking too much of them. An example I would give
Yeah.
is you reach out to someone to extend your hand, and they're reaching back to accept your hand being extended so they can cross over the water, cross over the cliff, the dangerous path. And for some people, it's too far. Like you're asking the spouses to unfortunately work through something that they may not have signed up for because they didn't know until they got involved in that situation. To your point, it's not something that people see every day, but once you're an intimate partner, once you're in that household, once you're living together and it comes out, you're like, "Oh my goodness, okay. I knew something was going on, but this is what it is." And to your point, if both parties can't meet, like they're literally speaking two different emotional languages, it's going to be difficult to carry forward.
Exactly. Well, that's my experience. Exactly. And you put it so well. You're asking them to do something that is beyond their capacity, right? And it was beyond my capacity. I couldn't fully enter into his autistic world. It was too foreign to me. And he couldn't enter into my neurotypical world. Even though he's so good at masking, but the thing is, when you're masking all day in the outside world, it's exhausting. And then you come home, you're going to keep masking with your partner? I don't think so. It's just too exhausting. Autistic burnout is very, very real. That's a term that's used a lot in the community. It's very real. And I think that was a factor with us. He was just exhausted. And then with the pandemic, being together 24/7 with really no other place to go, it was like, whoa, that's way too much closeness for a person with that profile. And it was for me too. And I must say, I now question whether or not I may be neurodivergent myself. This relationship has been a huge exercise in humility and in learning. And after all of this and discussions with other people, I had a sensitivity reader for the book who was neurodivergent. I wanted somebody to read it and let me know if I was saying or, you know, portraying anything that was like super offensive. Were there any things I needed to change? And she had ADHD and was also autistic. And in talking with her, she said to me, I think you might have ADHD because you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD. I had said to her when I first met her and I was going to hand her the manuscript, knowing that she was neurodivergent. And all of a sudden, I had like a mini panic attack. I thought, oh my God. And I said to her, oh, please don't hate me. So I thought, what if I'm saying something in here that is so offensive to her? I said, oh, please don't hate me. I'm worried. And she looked at me and she goes, you know what? You have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I thought, I do. And then I started thinking about it and thinking over the course of my life and going, yeah, she's right. I do. Plus, I have all the sensory sensitivities that a neurodivergent person has. And all my life, I've just thought, oh, I'm a HSP, a highly sensitive person. There's a whole book on that. I found ways to manage around it. But I have misophonia, can't stand loud noises, can't stand the sound of somebody chewing, can't stand bright lights. You know, smells. I never don't wear perfume. I might wear some body oil, but it's very light. It's got to be natural. If there's perfume around me, oh my God, I get headaches. I mean, all of it. Okay. And in looking at the whole profile and why I would have been attracted to somebody on the autism spectrum in the first place, I'm going, oh, I wonder if I have ADHD, perhaps inattentive type, because I can go down rabbit holes at the drop of a hat. And that's one of the signs, right? ADHD people in that form of neurodivergence were very driven by interests. And I get interested in something, and man, I'll go way down a rabbit hole. We lose track of time. There's many different things. In the end, does it matter? I don't know if it does or not, but it has caused me to reevaluate everything. Independent now of this relationship, because I'm not in it anymore, I think it's entirely possible that I myself am neurodivergent.
Now that you have that thought and it's a possibility, how do you think it's going to impact the type of person that you were, since it seems like you're becoming a new version of yourself?
Oh, but there's so many ways in which I'm becoming a new version of myself. It isn't just that. When you go through trauma, and honestly, in our marriage, there was a micro trauma every day. And then there were some larger traumas, and there was the trauma of the pandemic. And during the course of the marriage, first I had cancer, and then he had cancer, both thankfully resolved. But, all those things and just the process of aging itself, if you are open to it, is going to transform you. It just does. Because all that life experiences is accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And you're like a redwood tree. You're building rings of experience. Okay. And if you can really open to that and hold it, you become, I don't know how to say it. Some people have said a truer version of yourself. If you try to defend against it and push it away, then maybe not. But if you're open to that transformation, there's so many ways in which I've transformed, not just because of the marriage. Certainly, that's huge. It has transformed me. There's no doubt about it. And who I'm becoming now, I don't know. I actually do think I'm becoming a truer version of myself. It's like I am not taking crap from anyone at this point. It's like if you want to enter into my world and we can, do things together and it's fun, I'm there, totally there. I love adventures. I love traveling by myself. One of the things that helped me get the clarity to end my marriage was I took a trip by myself to Switzerland to live with, rent an apartment from a family that I had lived with 55 years before that when I was a junior in college. And I've been back to Basel, Switzerland 6 times, but I decided for my 75th birthday, I was going to treat myself to go and be with my Swiss family, my host family that I love, get away from the tension and the trauma that I was living with on a daily basis, and just celebrate. I wanted to celebrate. Hey, 75 is a big deal. A lot of people don't ever make it there. Okay. So about halfway through that trip, 3 weeks in, I woke up one morning and I went, wow, I feel like myself again. I'm having fun. I'm doing all these fun things and traveling to fun places and eating this amazing food and being with people I love and who love me. And I thought, I can't go back to that. There's no way. I have to be me. I have to be the Eleanor that I am now, which is an adventurous, curious person who is very affectionate and wants to be with people who can respond to me. I can't be with somebody who, for whatever reason, whether it was autism or something else, who cannot respond, who cannot meet me. That's not okay. I don't know how much time I have left. I am not going to be in a miserable marriage, no matter what upheaval, no matter what financial consequences. I am not going to do that. And once I realized that, I think that was a step on the path of transformation. I just went, yeah, okay. A lot of people at the age of 75 wouldn't, first of all, they wouldn't have gotten married at the age of 71. That's kind of out there already. But they would never get divorced at the age of 75, give up a beautiful house, go through having their life turned upside down. But I just thought, you know what? I'm not going to live like this. No way. I have too much life left in me. I have too many things I want to do. And so getting to that point, yeah, that's a form of transformation.
I think some people underestimate or underappreciate, I should say, how exhilarating self rediscovery truly is.
Oh, well said, my friend.
Yeah. I went, when you mentioned the vacation, I remember the first time I went on a solo trip. It was at that time I went to Panama
Ooh,
and I needed it. I went there. The people were so friendly. I came back so tanned because I was having so much fun with just meeting people and enjoying the culture itself. I look back at myself, and maybe you had this conversation within yourself, Eleanor, and I was like, why didn't I do this sooner?
mm, yeah.
Right? Did you
Oh,
have
yeah.
similar thoughts as well?
I had the thought, but honestly, the life I was living during the middle part of my life, I was a single mom raising two kids, mainly on my own, having to have big corporate jobs in order to make the money to give the kids shoes and college educations, right? And I always knew that once that part of my life was over, I was going to go back to traveling and to doing things. And that is what I did. I ended up having to work in corporate settings until I was 67 years old because, there were a couple of market crashes in there and a few unexpected things. And I lost a job or two and had to find other jobs and blah, blah, blah. Life happens. So the very next year after I retired, I went to France and Spain for 6 weeks. Now I traveled with a person at that point, but I mean, I wasn't going to waste any time. And trust me, I am not wasting any time, any chance I get. I want to be doing something adventurous and fun and stimulating. And like you said, the thing I love about solo travel is just going, sitting in a cafe, talking to people in my bad French. I'll just babble on in my bad French. I have a good accent, so people are very forgiving of me. But I don't know tenses. I don't know. There's certain words I forget, and I'll throw in an English word. Oh my God, I have had the best conversations on park benches, in cafes, sitting at the bar in a restaurant. That's a great thing to do. If you're traveling on your own, oh, my highest advice is sit at the bar and engage with the other people at the bar and engage with the bartender. I did that on a trip to Quebec once. Oh my God, I had the best time in that bar. And I happened to sit next to two people who were from California, not far from where I live. We had a fantastic conversation. The bartender suggested certain, drinks, a certain wine. I wanted a particular kind of French rosé. He knew exactly what I wanted. He suggested the cheese that would go well with it. I talked to him about his work and about where he lived and, what was it like living in Quebec. Oh my God, makes me want to just get on a plane and go back there.
Yeah, that is something I would love to do because it takes courage. And I think a lot of people don't have it within them. And another thing, as you mentioned earlier, you mentioned you don't know how much time you have left. I think some people suffer from thinking they have an unlimited amounts of time, and they can say that, well, you know what, Eleanor, you know what, Train, I'm going to do this next month, next
Right,
year, 5 years from now.
right.
And when it comes to your happiness and your peace, that should never wait. It's right now, here and now, all the time, every time. Would you agree?
Oh my heavens, I want to embroider that on a doily and post it on my wall. Yes, I would most certainly agree, And I, Absolutely. And honestly, it doesn't have to be something as I don't know what you would say, not glamorous exactly, but as adventurous as getting on a plane and going somewhere by yourself. I took a walk yesterday around my own community and I let myself be a flaneur or a flaneuse because I'm female. And I just wandered. I didn't really know where I was going, but I thought to myself as I was walking up this one hill, oh, there's this little park up here I haven't been to a long time. I really want to go there. And I went there and it was so beautiful. Oh my God, the birds, the colors. We have these intense fall colors now. I know people won't believe in Northern California we have fall colors, but we do. And here at Rossmore, in this valley where I live, the colors at this time of year are just off the hook. And so I was talking right out loud to myself, going, oh my God, I can't believe it. Snapping photos, having fun. And then I thought, oh, wait, let me see what street am I on. And at one point I kind of got lost. I kind of got disoriented. I thought, where am I? And then I looked and I saw, oh, that's my old street where we lived when we first moved here. Okay. I want to go by our old house. So I kept walking, got there, looked around, remembered I was having all these memories of like before we were married. And it was like I could have been sad, but I didn't really feel sad. I just felt like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And then I remembered, oh, we used to walk this way and we used to go up this staircase to this one street that's up high above, and there's a bench up there, and you can look out over the whole valley from that bench. And so I just walked up there and I sat, and it was beautiful. It was so uplifting. It was so nourishing. So, exactly what you said, Terrain. Now is the moment. Now is your moment. Seize the moment, whatever that looks like for you. And sometimes for me, it's just sitting on the couch and watching some HGTV show. I love watching people fix houses. I love it. It can be quiet. It doesn't have to be out in the world or dancing. I like dancing to my Pandora station, right? I mean, life is for discovery. Life is for having fun, okay? Life is for connecting to yourself and to others. And if you're alive, then come on, let's go.
Do you think maybe some people spend too much of their life surviving it and not thriving throughout it?
Yes, and I think our culture kind of pushes us in that direction. I mean, I don't want to, alienate anybody, but hey, late stage capitalism, it's all about hustle culture. Thank God I'm not in it anymore, although I'm caught up in it now because I'm promoting a book. So you better believe I'm hustling. I'm really hustling. But on the other hand, that's my choice, okay? Nobody's making me. But in those years, from my, like mid 30s all the way to my mid 60s, when I was completely chained to my desk in a little gray cubicle, I didn't stop having fun, believe me. But I could devote less time and I had less mental space for that because I had so much responsibility. So, no shade on anybody who's in that place in their life. If that's where they are, that's a choice, right? And it's a valid choice. I have no regrets about all I did to raise my children. Absolutely none. Now I have two beautiful grandchildren, and I see my daughter going through the same things I went through at her age, right? Busy, so busy, working. Her husband's working. They've got a dog. They've got the two kids. The kids have issues. It's life, right? And so whatever stage of life you're at, just know that if you're living true to yourself, you are living well. And to be true to myself, when I was in that middle phase of my life, I needed to be that responsible person who was working very hard, accumulating savings, setting myself up for this now later stage of my life where now I'm living off what I accumulated during that time when I was working constantly, pretty much.
I think one of the biggest um, aha moments, also as one of the biggest tragedies in the life, is that there's so many people that realize who they should be so much later on in life, that they either decide to ignore it, even though they know that happiness is the end of that road, and they just continue to be who they are because it's easier and is more comfortable just to continue the course until maybe they're not here. And I've seen so many people skip out on their passions or their dreams or things that they should truly be doing just so they could continue to be the version of themselves that they were told to be, either by their parents, maybe society, or even their friends.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. And we can put those kind of pressures on ourselves too. I had expectations of myself. That's partly why I probably worked in the jobs that I did and made the choices I did because I had certain expectations of myself. Yes, and somebody I follow and admire a lot is the meditation teacher Tara Brach. And one of the things she says is that oftentimes at the end of people's lives, when they're, uh, on their deathbed and their last words are their biggest regret is that they didn't live true to themselves. So, that is really, really sad. And, I lived true to myself every single moment? No, probably not. But as I look back, I don't know. I have some kind of determination or resilience or whatever you want to call it that nothing is going to keep me down for long. It's just like, no, I'm not going there because there's so much richness in this world. There's so much beauty. There's so many wonderful people. There's so many books to read. There's so much great wine to drink. There's so much great food. There's so much great music. And as a human species, we've created all these things. How amazing is that? Right? We have constructed and created this world that we're living in, and you can look at it and say, "Woo, some of that's pretty dark," and you'd be right. But on the other hand, you can look around and you can see amazing things, people doing amazing things, people being kind, people helping, people doing heroic things, just ordinary people. And I choose to turn my gaze in that direction. It's a choice.
It is, it is. And I've even seen some people take on grief. Like usually grief is when someone passes away, but then you have some people who experience grief because they're grieving a life that they know that they could have had, but they chose not to do it, as you mentioned, right? Because they're living with regrets. And it's a shame that we have humans have spent so much time creating all these wonderful things in the world, but yet there's so many of us that don't participate in them, even when we know it's going to be beneficial. Like I still go back to all the road trips I've taken, the vacations I've taken, and I couldn't look at my life and say, wow, if I didn't have this, what would my life be like? All these
Hmm.
joys, Eleanor, gone.
Hmm.
Imagine like everything that brings you happiness, that brings you life, that brings you peace. Imagine that was all taken away from you. How would you think your life would be different at that point?
Well, it would be it would be tragic. It would be hard. I think of people in this very moment in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Sudan. I never forget that for a minute. It isn't like that's not, I'm unaware. And it breaks my heart. It is tragic. And everybody has to make their own choices of how they're going to respond to that. And I respond by certain activities that I can do here locally and certain, you know, entities like Medicine Sans Frontières and Jose Andres's World Central Kitchen and places, people and entities that I know are going to those places and attempting to help by contributing what I can to those things. But if it happened to me, if there were bombs falling on my head right now, I it would be I don't even know what it would be. Honestly, can I really imagine it? I'm not sure if I can. I think I would be sort of like an Anne Frank type figure. I'd find a little place to hide. I'd find a way to be safe, and I would just write my brains out because that's what I do. I mean, that's what I why I hope. I mean, you have to be kind of crazy to write books. It's a just unbelievable amount of work. And I have whatever it is that makes me want to do that. And so that's probably what I'd do. I'd find a little closet somewhere and I'd get out a notebook and I'd just start writing and pray that people would bring me food. I mean, I don't know. I don't think, honestly, who knows? Because none of us know what it would take to break us. We don't know until it happens. But I will say this, I'm going to another book. This is my first book, Swimming with Maya. This is my daughter Maya at the age of 18 months. This is my daughter Maya at the age of 19. Okay. This girl died after falling off a horse and hitting her head in the middle of the most amazing accomplishment. She was an actress. She had just got accepted to UCLA with a full scholarship from a community college, unheard of. She was out celebrating when the accident happened. And if anything was ever going to break me, the death of that child was going to break me. And I did break. And it took a lot of work and a lot of writing and a lot of therapy and a lot of long walks and a lot of friends and a lot of love and a lot of determination to come back from that. But I did. So I think a lot of people would say, oh, before it happened to me, I would say if I knew somebody who had lost a child, I would say, oh God, if that ever happened to me, I couldn't go on. And then it did happen to me. And there were periods of time where I thought, oh, I can't go on. And I didn't want to harm myself. I just wanted to be where Maya was. And if that meant I had to die to be with Maya, I was willing to do that. But I knew that I couldn't do that because I had my other beautiful daughter, Megan, and I could not leave this planet in that way. And so I had no choice. If that's how it felt to me. It was like, okay, well, the choice is obvious. I'm going to choose life. I'm going to choose Megan. I'm going to choose a future for myself, even though I can't even imagine it in this moment. I went to some very, very dark, deep places. And I discovered the thing about grief is you can go way down, and by some miracle, some grace of God, some something, you come back up again. And then the wave hits you again and you're knocked off. But you somehow, I don't know. So, what would it take to break me? I've been through what I consider to be the worst. I mean, maybe it would be worse if bombs were falling on my head. But the human spirit terrain is amazing. People survive amazing things. And I honestly, I do have concern that we as a species are creating so much trauma in the world right now. Entire generations who are going to be so traumatized. I don't know. I just pray that we find a way as a species to work our way through that and that people find the help and support that they need to recover.
I think a lot of people do need to find the courage to understand that there are a lot stronger than maybe they even give themselves credit for. We have survived a lot throughout our history as a people. On an individual level, many of us are strong. Sure, there's some things that he may be able to overcome that maybe I can't, and so on. But if we, and I want to go back to, I think your therapist mentions, if we give ourselves a little bit of space, a little bit of grace, then we can find ways to overcome things that at the time we're like, oh, Eleanor, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this. But when you sit down and you're like, okay, I need to do this. Not only for me, I need to do this for this person. I need
Mm-hmm.
to do this for that person. Then all of a sudden, the strength that you thought that wasn't strong enough, you pull from everyone else that you want to do this for. And now
Mm-hmm.
you become incredibly strong to withstand whatever it is you're going through. But I think the first step, and maybe this is what some people don't do, is that you have to believe that you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to believe that it's possible. And you have to be open to whatever mysterious forces are guiding you. And I think a lot of us, me included, I mean, definitely, I've gone through periods of time and even now where I feel like, oh, wait, what do I do next? And then I remember, oh, yeah, right. If I just sit here and, like you said, space and grace, something will come along that will guide me forward. And I think a lot of us don't have that level of trust. We don't trust that life is going to show us the way forward. What's the saying? It's something like, stranger, there is no path. Your next step is your path. You just put one foot in front of the other. There are days when that's all you can do. But if you do it and you're open to the signs and signals that are constantly coming to us, somehow you find a way. At least
So,
that's what
Eleanor,
I believe.
yes. So as we close, Eleanor, what last advice do you want to give to our audience today to make sure that they're helping themselves understand that they are strong enough to overcome what they're going through?
You know, I don't know that I have any advice, but what comes to my mind is remember who you were as a 4 or 5 year old child. Close your eyes and put yourself back into your 5 year old body. And that 5 year old had dreams and had energy and had, the ability to run and to play and to ride a bicycle and to climb trees or whatever it was. And if you can keep that part of you alive, the strength will come because that's life itself. Life is about growth. That's what it does. It grows us and it evolves us. And so if you just trust in that process, go back to that childhood part of you and just let that part come alive. I think that's honestly the best advice I could give anybody.